Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries has taken aim at the BBC for alleged nepotism and elitism and suggested it could be killed off by streaming services within a decade.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister said the great institution would be around for a long time to come. Should we call time on the public broadcaster now? We're joined now by Dame Esther Ranson, who says we'd lose more than we realise if we got rid of the BBC. And Madeline Grant, who believes the BBC can't carry on in its current form. Why not, Madeline?
Well, I think that the current funding model was set up at a time, like a wildly different media landscape. Back when the BBC operated genuinely a natural monopoly, in the sense that there were constraints on things like wavelengths in the 1930s. So the licence fee was established as a way of funding that service. And we now live in an incredibly pluralistic and diverse media landscape. We have other TV channels that prove that they can do much of what the BBC does and do it very well indeed. And I think whereas the licence fee was once necessary to provide that service, it has now given the BBC an extraordinary competitive advantage that is often being used to freeze out rivals, which I don't think was the idea when it was first set up.
So your issue is mainly around the fact that we still have to pay a licence fee to watch.
Yeah. Well, it's essentially an incredibly regressive poll tax on owning a TV set. And I think especially for younger viewers, such as myself, who consume media in a very different way, many of us, I think, are left a bit bemused as to why, that there is still this very ham-fisted way of forcing people to pay up. And I actually don't share Nadine Dorries' pessimism about the future of the BBC. I think it's wonderful and unparalleled in many ways. I just don't understand why, if we're so proud of it, if we have such faith in it, why there is this absolute objection to allowing any of it to kind of operate in any kind of competitive market.
Esther, what's your basic case for the licence fee continuing as it always has done as the basis of BBC funding?
Never say always, because life changes so rapidly, particularly technology changes so rapidly. But what I'm saying at the moment is that the BBC is offering not just Britain, but also the world, an extraordinary variety of journalism and entertainment, and it competes. I mean, Strictly has gone round the world, making a lot of money for the BBC and subsidising a lot of other programmes. And if you have a look at the offering of the BBC right across the board, from Repair Shop, through Horizon, through Gardener's World, through Countryfile, through all the extraordinary news programmes, including, I know you won't understand this, Susanna or Alistair, but there is, I understand, a breakfast programme on the BBC. You won't have seen it. Oh, so you were. Yeah. Now, you see, that's a perfect example, Susanna. What often happens is that the BBC nurtures brilliant talent, and when it is in full bloom, ITV comes along and cuts it and takes it and puts it in their bars. So the BBC is also improving broadcasting right across the board.
Madeline, isn't it the case that the right wing of the Conservative Party, and possibly papers like The Telegraph as well, have come from that perspective that doesn't really like things that can be defined, if you like, as being socialist, in that we're all having to be involved in the same way in something? And hasn't it always been a bit of a target for the right? And even though Boris Johnson is saying supportive things yesterday, the right wing of the Conservative Party has been gunning for the BBC for a long time.
There is definitely some MPs and certain schools of thought in the Conservative Party who are very anti-BBC, but it changes. I think it fluctuates depending on the general mood. And I think it's one of those issues that will rear its head for a while and then often will be kicked into the long grass because coming up with an alternative is difficult. There's a lot of talk, but actually often the Conservative Party doesn't seem to kind of really get its head together and think of some kind of alternative. But I mean, I don't think it's a surprise that people who are conservatively minded are against it, because it is, as you say, it's a socialist structure. It goes way back. It goes back to a time when the world looked very different indeed. And I don't think Conservatives generally like these kind of monopoly privileges that exist. I mean, the BBC has done some wonderful things, of course it has, but it's also, in some areas, it has expanded in areas which already were being well served already by other outlets, and it's had the effect of freezing out the competition. I mean, does it really need, for example, does it need to have such a wide-ranging website? Did they really need to branch out so heavily into local radio that's put plenty of local outlets out of business? Do they need to venture into things like podcasts, which have incredibly low startup costs and are already an area that's well served? I think these kind of questions, it's not surprising. I mean, Conservatives don't tend to be fond of monopoly advantages.
Esther, do you sense that there is a growing onslaught on the BBC and the way that it's funded? Earlier this year, Oliver Dowden, who was the Culture Secretary before Nadine Dorries, said that decriminalising the BBC licence fee, which probably would lead to more people not paying it, was still under active consideration. Nadine Dorries has questioned whether the BBC will still exist in a decade. I mean, Boris Johnson has come out and said, oh, no, 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 it'll be around for a long time to come. But a long time to come isn't forever, is it? Is there a chipping away at its authority?
Politicians tend not to like the BBC. And, Alistair, sometimes the left wing has been just as ardent in their attacks on the BBC. I can remember an election when someone called Harold Wilson, before your time, absolutely refused to talk to anyone from the BBC. And my late husband was employed to interview him because my late husband came from ITV, and everybody hoped that Harold Wilson would get mixed up and think it was ITV. So politicians don't like being accountable in the way that the BBC has always tried to make them accountable. I just wish the BBC would stop shooting itself in the foot. I wish it would stop paying its senior executives such ridiculous sums of money because, you know, they have a wonderful sort of toy to play with. Their only obligation is to please viewers. They haven't got to please shareholders or enormous Murdoch-style impresarios. Their obligation is only to the viewer. So stop paying your executives such huge sums of money. Forgive me saying so, stop paying some of your presenters such huge sums of money. Stop behaving as if you despise older viewers. For example, Eggheads was removed because it was supposed to have too old an audience. Try and play the PR game as effectively as some of the competitors in the broadcasting field do. And then I think you will have the whole public on your side, and no politician will dare say the kinds of things that Nadine has said, which is so outdated. I mean, she's described a BBC that hasn't existed for decades.
Madeleine, just on that, the point about Nadine's criticism about the BBC, one of the things she complained about was nepotism. She said that the BBC staff need to reflect a wider demographic than just people whose mums and dads work there. I think 99.9% of BBC staff would have wondered what on earth she was talking about. Because
or reflected upon her own situation with her family, two of her members of her family employed by her office at public expense.
Don't you, Madeleine, wasn't that a slight irony? Two of her daughters paid public cash in order to... I mean, not breaking any rules, has to be said, but, you know, people in glass houses, perhaps.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, you should certainly... MPs should look carefully at their own arrangements before they start casting those aspersions, and it's definitely a bit of a caricature. But I do think there is some truth to that caricature. I don't know if it's so much to do with people's mums and dads as to do with, I don't know, I think the BBC is so obsessed with fostering diversity of all kinds. It's kind of forgotten, it hasn't figured out how to do diversity of opinion. There are often very popular viewpoints amongst the British public, whole ways of thinking that I don't feel receive much airtime on the BBC at all. But I think actually the point about technology and the way that the landscape and the tectonic plates have kind of shifted beneath the BBC, and yet the old poll tax model of funding it has remained. I think that's the far more salient point. I mean, I'm not sure that any national broadcaster could possibly find a kind of form of impartiality that would please everyone. I just think that the way that viewing habits are changing, the way that younger audiences are changing, and as Esther said, the BBC seems to be involved in this kind of absolutely psychotic spiral where it tries to get to woo younger viewers, and in the process alienates their core audience of older viewers. I just don't really know how you reconcile that. The technological change has come, and you can't really undo that situation.
OK.
Yeah, I mean, I would say part of the reason for that is, of course, they need younger people because they're going to be the ones paying the licence fee, and they need reasons, compelling reasons to pay the licence fee. Both, thank you very much indeed. Replying to criticisms that it is nepotistic, elite and biased, the BBC said it's the first broadcaster to measure socio-economic diversity and pointed us to latest data showing that more than 50% of staff come from state schools, with only 11% being privately educated.
Where did the other 39% go?
I'm not entirely sure.